The kid didn't even look at it. Not really. He held it up between his thumb and index finger like it was a bottle cap somebody found in a parking lot. Walter Briggs stood on the other side of the counter in his old brown corduroy jacket, his hands flat on the glass, watching a 26-year-old stranger dangle his father's Medal of Honor by the ribbon like it was a prize from a carnival game. "Yeah," the kid said. "We get military stuff in here all the time." He set it down on the counter, not gently. He set it down the way you set down a TV remote when the batteries are dead. Then he leaned back in his chair and crossed his arms. "Honestly, I could probably do $20. $20. For a Medal of Honor." Now let me tell you how an 82-year-old veteran named Walter Briggs ended up standing in a pawn shop in Dayton, Ohio, holding a medal that a 26-year-old kid with a nose ring just offered $20 for. Because this story didn't start in that shop. It started a long time before that. It started with a man named Harold Briggs, who went to war and came home different, and who never once, not in 43 years, told his family what he did to earn what was inside that blue leather case. Walter Briggs was born in 1942 in Kettering, Ohio, a small suburb south of Dayton. His father, Harold Raymond Briggs, had enlisted in the Army in February of 1941, 10 months before Pearl Harbor. Harold was 20 years old. He'd grown up on a dairy farm in Clark County, 60 acres of flat Ohio pasture land, 100 head of cattle, a father who didn't talk much, and a mother who talked enough for both of them. Harold was the middle child of 5, and quiet, good with his hands. Could fix a tractor engine at 15, shoe a horse at 16, and build a fence line so straight you'd think he used a surveyor's transit. The Army saw a young man who followed orders and didn't complain and put him in the infantry. Harold served in North Africa and then in Italy. He was at Anzio. He was at Monte Cassino. What happened there, the specific action that earned him the medal, Harold never discussed, not once. His family knew he'd been wounded because he walked with a slight limp in his left leg for the rest of his life. They knew he'd been decorated because his discharge papers said so. But the medal itself and the citation that came with it, Harold kept in a blue leather case in the top drawer of his bedroom dresser. He never displayed it. He never showed it to his children. And he never mentioned it at VFW meetings or 4th of July picnics. When Walter once asked him, at age 12, what the medal was for, Harold looked at his son for a long moment and said, "It's for something I had to do." That was all. Walter never asked again. Walter carried that moment for the rest of his life, the look in his father's eyes when he asked, not anger, not impatience, something deeper, something that said, "If I told you what happened on that field, you would carry it too, and I won't do that to you." Harold protected his family from his medals the same way he protected those soldiers at Anzio, by putting himself between them and something terrible. You need to understand something about men like Harold Briggs, the ones who saw real combat, not the kind you see in movies, but the kind where the man next to you is alive, and then he isn't, and there's nothing you can do about it. Those men came home, and they closed a door inside themselves. They didn't talk about what happened behind that door. They went back to their farms and their factories and their families, and they mowed the lawn on Saturdays and went to church on Sundays and never said a word. Not because they forgot, because they couldn't bear to remember out loud. Harold came home in 1945 and went back to the dairy farm. He married a woman named Colleen Murphy from Springfield in 1946. They had 4 children. Walter was the oldest. Harold ran the farm for another 37 years. He woke up at 4:30 every morning. He milked cows. He baled hay. He fixed equipment. He did everything with that slight limp, and he never complained about it. Well, not once. When Walter was old enough to help, Harold taught him everything about the farm, how to read the weather by watching the cows, how to check a fence line for weak posts, how to keep a tractor running through another winter. What he didn't teach Walter was anything about the war. Harold passed away in 1988. Heart failure. He was 67 years old. He'd been up at 4:30 that morning to check on a sick calf, even though Colleen had told him to rest. He collapsed in the barn. Walter found him there an hour later, sitting against a hay bale with his eyes closed and his hands in his lap as if he'd just decided to take a nap. The ambulance came, but there was nothing to do. Harold Briggs died the way he lived, quietly, without asking anyone for help. After the funeral, Colleen asked Walter to clean out Harold's dresser. She couldn't do it herself. Walter opened the top drawer and found, beneath a stack of folded handkerchiefs, the blue leather case. He opened it. Inside, on a bed of white satin, was the Medal of Honor, a gold 5-pointed star hanging from a light blue silk ribbon with 13 white stars. Behind it was a folded piece of paper, the citation. Walter read it, standing in his father's bedroom with the morning light coming through the curtains. The citation described an action near Anzio, Italy, on January 30th, 1944. Private First Class Harold R. Briggs, under heavy enemy fire, had advanced alone across an exposed field to pull 3 wounded soldiers to safety. He'd been hit in the left leg during the second trip, but continued. On his third trip, he encountered an enemy machine gun position and neutralized it with grenades, as allowing his platoon to advance. The citation used words like extraordinary heroism and conspicuous gallantry and above and beyond the call of duty. Walter read it twice. Then he folded it carefully, put it back in the case, and closed the drawer. He didn't tell his mother what it said. She didn't ask. For 36 years after that, the medal stayed in Walter's house. It moved from Harold's dresser to Walter's. Same position, top drawer, under the handkerchiefs. Walter kept it the way his father kept it, hidden, respected, unspoken. He'd open the drawer sometimes late at night and look at it. He never picked it up. He just looked at it and thought about his father walking across that field with a bullet in his leg, going back for the third man. Now, Walter was 82. Colleen was gone. She'd passed in 2006. But Walter's wife, Jean, had passed 3 years ago. Of his 3 siblings, 2 were dead, and 1 was in a nursing home in Toledo. Walter lived alone in a small ranch house in Kettering that he and Jean had bought in 1971 for $18,500. The house was paid off, but it was falling apart. The water heater had failed in August, cold showers for 2 months. The plumber's estimate, $2,800 for a new unit installed. Walter's pension from the Dayton Municipal Water Department, where he'd worked as a pipe fitter for 31 years, covered his bills with about $60 left over each month. His Social Security helped, but between prescriptions, groceries, and the property tax that went up every year, there was nothing extra, nothing set aside, nothing for emergencies. Walter didn't have anyone to call, not really, and not the kind of call where you say what you actually need. He had people who loved him, his son, his daughter, but love and proximity are different things, and Walter understood that. Harold Jr. sent a card on Father's Day. Linda called on Christmas. They were good kids. They'd grown up watching Walter work doubles at the water department and never complain, watching John stretch a pot of soup into 3 meals and never apologize. They'd learned, the way children learn everything, by watching. And what they'd learned was that the Briggs family handled things quietly. You didn't ask for help. You figured it out. His son, Harold Jr., named after his grandfather, was a long-haul trucker based in Amarillo, Texas. They talked on the phone every few weeks, but Harold Jr. had his own bills, his own family, his own problems. Walter's daughter, Melinda, was in Raleigh, North Carolina, working as a hospital administrator. She was busy. She called when she could. Walter understood. He didn't blame them. But he also didn't ask them for money. He was 82 years old. He'd served 2 years in the Army himself. Vietnam, 1966 to 1968, a communications specialist in Da Nang. He'd worked 31 years for the city. He'd paid his taxes. He'd buried his wife. And he was not going to call his children and tell them he couldn't afford hot water. His neighbor, a retired firefighter named Dale Kemper, suggested the pawn shop. "Take something in you don't need," Dale said. "Get a few $100. Fix the water heater." Walter went home and opened the top drawer. He looked at the blue case for a long time. He didn't want to sell it. But he didn't know what else he had that was worth anything. Jean's jewelry had been given to Linda. The house was full of furniture that wasn't worth hauling to a shop. The only thing Walter owned that might be worth real money was the one thing he'd spent 36 years protecting. He picked up the case. He held it for a moment, feeling the weight of it, the smooth leather, the brass clasp. Then he put on his brown corduroy jacket, got in his 2004 Ford Ranger, and drove to Prestige Pawn on Wayne Avenue. Let me tell you about that shop. Prestige Pawn had been open for 8 years. The owner was a woman named Sandra Kowalski, who ran a clean, well-lit shop, better than most. But Sandra wasn't there that day. She was at a doctor's appointment. Behind the counter was her employee, a 26-year-old named Marcus Webb. Marcus had worked there for 14 months. He had a nose ring, a fade haircut, and the confidence of someone who'd watched a lot of pawnshop reality TV and believed that qualified him to appraise anything. Walter walked in. The bell rang. Marcus looked up from his phone. "What you got?" Marcus said. Walter set the blue case on the counter and opened it. Marcus looked at the metal. He picked it up by the ribbon, held it up, squinted at it. "Military metal," he said. "Yeah, we get these. My uncle has like a drawer full of them. Yard sales, estate sales, they're everywhere." He set it back down with a clatter. "I could do $20, maybe 25 if the case is in good shape." $20. For the Medal of Honor. For a gold star that represented a man crossing a field under machine gun fire to save 3 lives. For the highest military decoration the United States can award. For the thing Harold Briggs kept hidden in a drawer for 43 years because what it represented was too heavy to display. Walter didn't flinch. He'd been under mortar fire in Da Nang. He'd buried his wife standing at attention because that's what you do. He wasn't going to flinch at a 26-year-old with a nose ring. $20, Walter said. His voice was flat, controlled. The voice of a man who learned a long time ago that emotions are a luxury. "Yeah, look, I know it's got sentimental value," Marcus said. "But military medals? They're not really collectible unless it's something special. Like, if it was from the Civil War or something, maybe. But World War II stuff, Korea, there's tons of it." He shrugged, though Walter looked at the medal sitting on the white satin. He thought about cold showers. He thought about the water heater sitting dead in the basement. He thought about calling Harold Jr. in Amarillo and saying, "Son, I need help." The words tasted like rust in his mouth. He couldn't say them. He started to reach for the case. Nobody in that shop knew what Walter was really holding. "Subscribe to Hidden Worth. You don't want to miss this." That's when the front door opened. A woman walked in, 57 years old. Short gray hair, no nonsense, wire-framed glasses, a dark green blazer over a white blouse, black trousers, sensible flat shoes. She carried a rigid black portfolio case with a shoulder strap, the kind that archivists and museum professionals use. Her name was Dr. Patricia Kwan. She was a military memorabilia specialist and authenticator who worked with the National Medal of Honor Museum, the Smithsonian's National Museum of American History, and private collectors worldwide. Sandra Kowalski had hired her 6 months ago to come in twice a month and review any military or historical items that came through the shop. Dr. Kwan set her portfolio on the counter. She saw the blue case. She saw the metal inside it. She stopped moving. She didn't say a word for 5 full seconds. She just looked at it. Then she looked at Marcus. Then she looked at Walter. "May I examine this?" she asked Walter, quietly, respectfully, the way you speak in a church. "Go ahead," Walter said. Dr. Kwan opened her portfolio and took out a pair of white cotton gloves. She put them on before she touched anything. She lifted the metal by the edges of the star, never by the ribbon, and held it under the overhead light. She turned it over. She examined the reverse side with a small magnifying glass. She looked at the ribbon, studying the weave pattern and the color of the silk. She opened the case wider and found the folded citation underneath the satin liner. "May I read this?" she asked. Walter nodded. She unfolded the citation and read it. She read it once, quickly, scanning for dates, unit designations, the bureaucratic language of official military records. Then she read it again, slowly, word by word. The way you read something when you realize you're holding a piece of history in your hands. When she looked up, her expression had changed, and the professional calm was still there. She'd authenticated hundreds of military items over her career, but underneath it was something else, something she couldn't fully suppress, something closer to awe. "Mr. Briggs," she said. She'd read his father's name on the citation. "Is this your family's?" "It was my father's," Walter said. "Harold Briggs." "And your father received this directly? It wasn't purchased? Not inherited from outside the family?" "My father earned it," Walter said. There was iron in that sentence. "January 1944. Anzio." Dr. Kwan set the citation down on the counter with both hands. She removed her glasses and pressed her fingers to the bridge of her nose. Then she put her glasses back on and looked at Marcus. "What did you offer for this?" she asked. $20, Marcus said, and he was starting to look less confident. Dr. Kwan didn't respond to that. She turned back to Walter. "Mr. Briggs, I need you to understand what you have here. This is not a standard military decoration. This is the Medal of Honor, the highest award for valor in combat that the United States government issues. It's awarded by the President. Since its creation in 1861, fewer than 3,500 have ever been awarded across all branches of service. Roughly 40% of those were awarded posthumously, meaning the recipient didn't survive the action." She paused. "Your father survived. He came home, and he kept this in a drawer for over 40 years. Do you know how rare that is? Not the medal itself, but the story. An original Medal of Honor, with the original citation in the original case, and with direct family provenance from the recipient's own son." She held up the medal, still in her gloved hands. "The star is solid gold, but that's the least valuable thing about it. What makes this extraordinary is the provenance. Auction houses, museums, and serious collectors will pay significant premiums for a Medal of Honor that can be traced directly to the recipient, especially one from the Second World War, especially from a specific action like Anzio, and especially with the original citation intact." She set the medal back on the satin. "A Medal of Honor with this level of provenance, documentation, and condition, at a reputable auction, you would be looking at somewhere between $60,000 and $75,000. She let the number sit there. $67,000 is a reasonable midpoint estimate. $67,000. The shop was quiet. The air conditioning hummed. The fluorescent lights buzzed. Marcus stood behind the counter with his mouth slightly open. His nose ring caught the light. His phone was in his back pocket now, forgotten. $20. He'd offered $20 for a $67,000 medal. Walter didn't move. He stood with his hands at his sides, straight-backed, the way men stand when they've been trained to stand, the way his father stood, the way Walter himself had stood at roll call in Da Nang 40 years ago. His jaw was tight. His eyes were fixed on the medal. He wasn't thinking about the money. He was thinking about his father. He was thinking about a 20-year-old kid from a dairy farm in Clark County crawling across an exposed field under machine gun fire to pull a wounded man to safety. Doing it once, getting hit, doing it again, getting hit again, doing it a third time because there was a third man out there. And Harold Briggs was not the kind of person who left someone behind. 43 years Harold kept this in a drawer. 43 years he walked past it every morning and never said a word. Not because he wasn't proud, because the price of earning it was too high to celebrate. $67,000, Walter said. He said it the way his father might have said it, quietly, without expression, as a fact. "I'd recommend Heritage Auctions or Rock Island Auction Company," Dr. Kwan said. Both have dedicated militaria departments with experience handling Medal of Honor consignments. They'll photograph it, verify it against the official records at the National Archives, and market it to the right collectors. Some Medal of Honor recipients' awards are in museum collections. This one could easily end up there. She paused. Mr. Briggs, you should also know. There are organizations that assist families of Medal of Honor recipients. The Congressional Medal of Honor Society maintains records of every recipient. If your father's service hasn't been fully documented in their archives, this could help complete the record. His story deserves to be preserved. Walter nodded. He reached for the medal. He picked it up, not by the ribbon the way Marcus had, but by the edges of the star, the way Dr. Kwan had shown him. He set it back on the satin. He closed the case. The brass clasp clicked shut. Marcus cleared his throat. Sir, I had no idea. I've never actually seen one of those in person. If you want, I could call Sandra, the owner, and maybe we could work out a better... Walter looked at him. Just looked at him. The same look his father must have given men who didn't understand what sacrifice meant. Calm, patient, but final. Son, Walter said, you offered me $20 for the reason my father couldn't sleep at night. Marcus didn't say another word. Walter tucked the blue case into the inside pocket of his corduroy jacket, the same pocket where he used to carry his wallet when he was working for the city. He buttoned the jacket. He nodded to Dr. Kwan. Then he turned and walked out of Prestige Pawn into the October sunlight. Well, let me tell you what happened after that. Walter called Dr. Kwan that Friday. She connected him with Heritage Auctions in Dallas. They sent a representative to Dayton to examine the medal and the citation. The authentication process took 5 weeks. They cross-referenced the citation against records at the National Personnel Record Center in St. Louis in the National Archives. Everything matched. Harold Raymond Briggs, Private First Class, United States Army, Medal of Honor, Anzio, Italy, January 30th, 1944. The medal was listed in Heritage's Spring Military and Patriotic Americana auction. The catalog entry included the full citation and a photograph of Harold from his service records, a young man with a serious face and ears that stuck out slightly, wearing his dress uniform. The pre-sale estimate was listed at $55,000 to $75,000. The winning bid came from a private museum in Virginia, dedicated to World War II veterans from the Ohio Valley. They wanted the medal not as an investment, but as a centerpiece of their Anzio exhibit. They wanted Harold's story told. The medal sold for $68,200. After Heritage's commission, Walter received a check for just under $55,000. He deposited it at his credit union in Kettering. The teller didn't ask questions. Walter wasn't the kind of man who invited them. The water heater was replaced the following week, $2,800. He also had the roof patched. It had been leaking in the back bedroom, and the furnace inspected before winter. Total, $5,100. He put $15,000 in a savings account he hadn't touched in 6 years. He sent $5,000 to Harold Jr. in Amarillo. No explanation. And just a check in an envelope with a note that said, "For the kids." Harold Jr. called that evening and tried to ask where the money came from. Walter said, "Your grandfather." Harold Jr. didn't ask again. Walter donated $2,000 to the Congressional Medal of Honor Society. In the memo line of the check, he wrote, "For Private First Class, Harold R. Briggs, Anzio, 1944. And with $5,000 of the money, Walter did something his father never did. He drove to Washington, D.C. and visited the National World War II Memorial. He'd never been. He stood at the Ohio pillar for 20 minutes in the November cold, his hands in the pockets of his brown corduroy jacket, and he didn't speak. Other visitors walked past him, families, school groups, tourists taking photographs. A park ranger asked if he was all right. Walter nodded. He just stood there, an 82-year-old man paying respects to a 20-year-old kid from a dairy farm who crossed a field 3 times because that's who he was. The blue case is empty now. It sits in the same drawer, Walter's dresser, top drawer, under the handkerchiefs. Same spot Harold kept it. Same spot Walter kept it for 36 years. But now there's something else in the drawer beside it. A photograph from the Virginia Museum, sent in a thank you letter. It shows Harold's Medal of Honor in a glass case, lit from above, with a small brass plaque underneath. The plaque reads, Medal of Honor, PFC, Harold R. Briggs, United States Army Anzio, Italy, January 30, 1944, above and beyond the call of duty, donated by the Briggs family, Kettering, Ohio. Walter opens that drawer sometimes. He doesn't look at the medal anymore. It's not there. He looks at the photograph of the medal in its glass case, properly lit, properly honored, properly seen. And he thinks about his father, who never wanted anyone to see it, who kept it hidden for 43 years, who walked with a limp and never explained why, who answered his son's question with 5 words, "It's for something I had to do." Harold Briggs didn't think he deserved a medal. He thought he did what anyone would have done. He was wrong about that. Most people wouldn't have gone back. Most people wouldn't have crossed that field once, let alone 3 times. But Harold didn't see it that way. He saw 3 wounded men, and he went and got them. That's all. That's the whole story. And a kid behind a counter in Dayton, Ohio, held it by the ribbon and said, $20. He didn't know. He couldn't have known. Yeah, and that's the thing about worth. Real worth. The kind that doesn't fit in a display case or on a price tag. It hides. It sits in drawers under handkerchiefs. It walks with a limp and doesn't explain why. It crosses fields that nobody asks it to cross. And it waits, sometimes for decades, for someone to pick it up with both hands and say, "Do you know what you have here?" If this story reminded you that worth isn't always obvious, subscribe to Hidden Worth. We have more stories like this one, and every single one of them will surprise you. Most people walk past it. Most people offer $20 and move on. But every now and then, somebody stops. Somebody puts on white gloves. Somebody reads the citation. And what they find, what was there all along, is worth more than anyone imagined, not because of what it costs, but because of what it cost, because some things have hidden worth.